Any of you that have been around this channel for a while will know that I cover a number of topics, not just games. One of those recurring topics has been online privacy, and another, Linux distributions. Now, those videos are pretty dated and admittedly they're rough around the edges, but the premises remain the same, that people ought to take their online privacy much more seriously. And also, free and open source software is not only philosophically wonderful, but is by extension one of the best tools we have in securing our data. This is becoming increasingly important in an age where tech companies are generating absurd revenue from building profiles out of your browsing activity. This isn't tinfoil hat stuff. Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, they want your data because it's profitable, plain and simple. Anyway, I'm not going to go on too much about that sort of stuff because we all know it. And we can all be pretty sure that whilst the Queen of England isn't a lizard, we can be fairly sure that the CEO of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, doesn't give a shit about your rights.
And I was human. I am human.
What I want to look at right now is a free and open source way we can secure our devices and the things we do on them. So, in this video, I'm going to take a look at QubesOS, which is a Linux distribution that brands itself as a reasonably secure operating system. Therefore, the priority is security rather than convenience. The idea behind QubesOS is that it uses a virtualization technology called Zen that allows you as the user to dedicate a different cube for different activities. You'll have a cube for browsing, a cube for banking, a cube for working from home, and so on. All of these different app cubes are maintained by DOM0, the sort of master cube. The idea being that if you clicked on a shady link in your web browsing cube, that cube would self-destruct, leaving all the other cubes intact, and most importantly, DOM0. That said, if DOM0 were to be compromised, that would render the entire system unsecure. Therefore, the goal of setting up individual app cubes is to protect DOM0 at all cost. This mitigates the risk of anything malicious gaining root access to your system in the way that a lot of malware tries to grant itself administrator privileges in Windows, for example. Instead of being merely a fork of something like Debian or Fedora, Qubes utilizes templates from these distributions that you can use to set up your own cubes. For example, you might want Fedora for a work from home cube, but something like Debian may be more suitable for casual internet browsing. Those are just generalizations though, and I'm not saying that's how you ought to set up your cubes. Anyway, let's get into this. So to get started, the first thing you're going to want to do is to come to www.QubesOS.org. The link is in the description too. It'll bring you to this page with some endorsements. One in particular that does the rounds that's very famous is the fact that Edward Snowden endorses this. He claims he uses it too. Not sure if I believe that or not, but there we go. It's an endorsement nonetheless from our boy Eddie. You're going to want to click on download and install. You can download the ISO directly, or you can go with this other method that is named a word that shall not be mentioned on YouTube, because even when you use this method of retrieving files for a legitimate reason, YouTube just fucks you over for saying it. So there's that other method if you want to relieve some strain on the Qubes servers. Otherwise, you can directly download the ISO. You can also download all the hash values, a PGP signature, a release signing key, and you can download all of those in order to basically verify the signature and the integrity of the files that you're downloading. So that's a good thing to do, especially if you're going on bare metal. I didn't do that because this is just a virtual machine. You've also got all the documentation here to getting started, system requirements, and an installation guide that'll take you through how to do things step by step. So yeah, everything you need to know is here really. Also, this being a Linux distribution in a roundabout way, I guess, if you scroll right down, you've got access to the source code. So if you want to audit the source code to make sure that everything is legit, it's got a guide here to, make that available to you. You can use GitHub to basically look at the source code. The link's dead, but anyway, it's there. If you're competent enough at analyzing source code, you can audit this yourself to make sure everything is as it should be. Anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so before we get properly started, I'm just going to run through the virtual machine settings because there's a couple of things to note. First of all, we've got 8 gig of memory. I've given it 2 processors. That might not be enough. 40 gig of hard disk space. That, you know what, I've only got 54 gig free. I'm going to expand that. I'm going to give it 50. Why not? Okay, so that's now at 50 gig. We've got our ISO selected. As for video memory, I've given it 2 gigabytes of RAM there. One thing I should point out when it comes to the processors is you're going to want to ensure that you've got the top option selected there, and you're going to want to make sure that you've checked the box to virtualize IOMMU. Very important. We should be good to go though, so let's boot this up. Let's go into full screen. If we hit I here, we should be able to begin the installation. So I'll catch up with you when the installer has loaded, because this could take a little bit. Okay, so it looks like we've got the Calamares installer here, pretty standard. I'm going to just change that to what I need it to be. Not that it matters, it's not like I really use much anyway. All of this, that needs changing to my time zone, which is right here. Good to go on that. Root account is disabled. Let's come up with a root password here, make it really secure. We don't want to lock the root account. I don't even know if that is the best thing to do here. I don't know if you really want access to the root with QubesOS. There's something in me saying that DOM0 is what you're going to want to be doing everything in. Automatic partitioning, that's good. Software selection QubesOS with XFCE. Yeah, we'll keep it like that. XFCE is nice and light. And we need to, I guess, check some options in here. Storage config, we can do automatic, custom, or advanced custom, which is Blive GUI. Blive? Don't know what that is actually. I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to encrypt. This is a virtual machine. I don't really need to worry about that. So that's good. Error checking storage configuration. What is the problem? So that's deselected it. So that's fine. We want that. It's giving me an error message. Error checking storage config. Click for details. New LV is too large to fit in free space. Qubes modify storage layout. What? Is it telling me that 50 gig is not big enough to install this? Because we were having that little issue there with the automatic partitioning, I assume that's because we're doing this on a virtual machine rather than bare metal. But I just came into the manual partitioning section. I set up a swap file of 4 gig, should be okay for this. A boot partition of 1 gig, and I've allocated the rest of the free space directly to DOM0, because I'm assuming that everything we do in Qubes, because we're working with different cubes, those cubes will be generated out of a root system that takes up the entirety of the space, if you get what I mean. Like DOM0 is going to need all the free space, aside from the boot and the swap. So let's commit this to right now. So we're destroying that unknown format, which was the drive that just wasn't formatted at all. So we're going to format that. We've created a partition table. It's MS-DOS. That's a little weird that it's, but okay. We've got our extended 4 there, which is our boot. Yeah, That looks good to me. That looks good to me. Our root partition's there, the swap's there. That looks good. Let's go for it. So we've got our custom partitioning selected here. User creation. So username, just keep it simple. Password, strong and secure. Really, really secure password right there. Really secure. And now we should be able to begin the installation. If this all goes according to plan, I'll see you when it's done. All right, we are done and we're good to go. So we've just got to do a quick reboot. That installation, even though I'm doing it to a virtual machine, honestly, took about 5 minutes. Nothing major at all. So yeah, pretty cool. So we're back at the initial setup. Everything seems to be okay so far. We just had that issue there. I'm sure it's because I was installing to a virtual disk, but we just had that issue with the automatic partitioning, but nothing that the custom partitioning didn't seem to sort out. Although if you were installing this to bare metal, as I said, I would recommend using fdisk. So that would be good. So here we go. We've got templates config, Fedora, Debian, or Unix. The default's Fedora 34, we'll leave that as it is. We want to create default system cubes, which are sysnet, sysfirewall, default display VM. I assume that's what that means. Make sysfirewall and sysUSB disposable. Yeah, we may as well keep that as it is. Create default application cubes, personal, work, untrusted, or vault. I like the sound of that. Use a cube to hold all USB controllers. I'm sure that it would be fine, but seeing as we're in a VM, I'm going to uncheck that actually and create Unix gateway and workstation cubes. We may as well enable system and template updates over the Tor anonymity network using Unix. That's cool. I'll leave that unchecked because I quite fancy seeing if I could create a cube specifically to use Tor. So yeah, we'll leave that as it is, really. Alright, so got a little bit of a display issue. There are certain options at the bottom of the screen that are being cut off, so I just had to tab through that so that I could get the configurations here to install. It's doing that now, so I'll see you when that's done and we can actually get into the system. Alright, we finally got to the login screen here. That process of doing the initial configuration, that took much longer than the actual process of installing the OS in the first place. So just be aware of that, although again, that might be because it's a VM and not on bare metal. So let's log in here. Let's see how this goes. All right. We open up a terminal. Can't shortcut to a terminal, but let's open up a terminal here. All right, first thing I'm going to do here now that I've got a terminal open is to try and resize this screen. And now I have a feeling that my resolution isn't in the list here. So I'm just going to try, yeah, my resolution of 1920 by 1080, a really common resolution, is not here. It's probably to do with the fact that it's a virtual machine rather than anything else. So I guess we will just go for 1680 by 1050. So if we do X random scale, 80 by 1050, that'll do. Jobs are good. All right, I guess we could do a quick top. I mean, this is XFCE, so it's not going to be that bad at all. And it isn't. So that's good. So I don't want to do too much within DOM0 because the way I understand it, you shouldn't really be doing things other than critical system things within DOM0. What you want to be doing are using your templates. Let's have a look what we've got here. So we've just got settings manager, appearance. I guess you've got all your styles here. Yeah, let's go for a dark theme. Kind of like that one. Icons, we've got GNOME, Adwaita, or high contrast. Just leave that as it is, that's fine. Fonts, fine. Yeah, we'll keep that as it is. I do have a Raspberry Pi. This is very, very similar to Raspbian, I have to say. So that's the only system tool we've got there, but we've got all these other things: bulk rename, color profiles, desktop display. What's in display? Can we change the resolution to the, oh my goodness, to the right one in here? No, not even in here. It's just one of the only resolutions that isn't listed. Kind of weird, but I guess that will be to do again with the fact that it's a VM, and probably the fact that I've got an NVIDIA card, and the website does say that this, may not work so well with NVIDIA stuff. And as with most distros, having access to an AMD card or some such is preferable when it comes to drivers. So nothing we can really do in here. We can select a nice little background, but I guess we'll keep DOM0 the same. No need to mess around with that. Keyboard, mouse and touchpad, pulse audio, all the usual stuff really. Alright, so let's jump into a cube. And personal. Yeah, personal's good. And we've got personal files, Firefox, or terminal. Cool, let's open Firefox. Little slow, I'm noticing here. That's alright. I've been meaning to check out Qubes for a while. Back when I did the Let's Try Linux series, I actually had a comment on one of the videos. I think it was on the Parrot video. Somebody asked me, am I going to do Qubes? And I did say I would, but circumstances being what they were, I just didn't get around to it. And eventually I forgot all about it. And now I think it's a good time to come back to it. So it's super slow, I have to say, but my internet is not the best. So while that's like booting up, like what are we using here? About Firefox. It's the latest version, I think, and it's not a snap. That's good. That's good. I did have an issue on the distro that I've got on my laptop at the moment where I upgraded to the latest long-term support release, and Mozilla have just, for some reason, they've just wiped out the deb package and replaced it with a snap, and it's just been awful. Every time it updated, Firefox would just brick itself and I'd have to reset everything. So I just switched browser because I'm not about that. So let's go to YouTube. Choose what I share, that's important. We could harden it, but I don't suppose there's much point, really, because we're in a cube. So anything, any fingerprinting or anything like that, it's just going to record data about this cube and not DOM0. And because it's in a virtual machine, it's not going to capture anything about the host anyway. So here we are, YouTube right there. I'm going to reject all that shit, even though it doesn't matter because it would only get stored on this cube and it would be completely separate. I mean, that's the idea, right? If I was to go and open a work cube and open a Firefox pane within that cube, then what's going to happen is any cookies or whatever is going to get stored to that cube, and it's not going to get stored on DOM0, which will always remain clear. So it's just a really nice principle that we've got here. Really nice principle that, whatever I do in this browser will not affect this browser and vice versa, and whatever I do in either browser will not affect the main system. So that's super cool. I love that idea. Just isolating everything. So we know we can browse the internet pretty cleanly. Let's open up a terminal. So I guess what we're going to want to do within our work cube is have some sort of office suite available, right? I mean, that makes sense. If this is going to be our work cube, we're going to want to be able to look at some spreadsheets or do some Word documents, whatever. So being that this is a work cube and I'm going to want to get work done on it, hypothetically, I'm going to want some sort of office package. And also considering that the security model of Qubes makes it ill-advised to install anything with DOM0, I'm going to use the work cube terminal to try and install an office package. And being that this is a Fedora template, I'm assuming that this is just going to use DNF as Fedora does. So let's try LibreOffice. Oh boy, this is going to take a while again, I would imagine. Right, so we got through that. Yes, that's fine. Obviously, if you're coming from a Debian-based distro, apt defaults to yes when it asks questions like this, whereas Fedora defaults to no and you've got to type in the Y. You can't just hit enter, otherwise it'll abort the whole process. So let's continue with that. That's going to download, and I'll meet you when it's done. All right, it looks like we've got an Office package installed, so let's see how this works. So we had the terminal open, and I mean, what, do we just run it from the terminal? There we go. So we use the terminal for everything. That's cool. I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. If you're not comfortable with the terminal, I'm pretty sure there'll be a GUI variant of doing all of this sort of stuff. All right, so this is just going to work as normal. Obviously, we are using QubesOS, Edward Snowden's favorite distro. It's secure. Okay, so that's all right. Now, what if we want to go work terminal so we can have them both open at the same time? So let's, I guess, install, because another thing we might want in our work terminal is something like GIMP. So let's get that going. And I suppose what we can do while we're waiting for GIMP to do its thing is get into another workspace and open another cube. So Vault, that's all going to be secure storage for files, I guess. Untrusted is when you want to check out those dodgy links. We've got anonymous Unix, which gives us access to the Tor browser. Why not? Because the thing people don't realize that, that they're always going to assume as soon as you say Tor browser or Tor network, that the first thing you're going to want to do is visit onion links and hidden services and things of that nature. That's not the case. You can use the Tor browser as a standard browser. Okay, it takes a little bit longer, but if you use the Tor browser as your normal internet browser, what you're going to do is just connect to the Tor relay and make use of all those nodes to obfuscate your connection and, in a roundabout way, anonymize, although not completely, but you are going to anonymize yourself to an extent. So this is the Tor browser, and what we can literally do in the Tor browser is go to something like, again, YouTube, right? So automatically we're searching with DuckDuckGo. Now, DuckDuckGo, I don't know how I feel about that search engine at the moment. There are better alternatives. DuckDuckGo markets itself as, blocking trackers from companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon, but it does not block trackers from Microsoft, and essentially it makes DuckDuckGo sort of in bed with Microsoft. They're not going to stop Microsoft from fingerprinting your devices. So, but we're in a cube, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay. So we need to configure this, and I guess we'll just keep those all the same. I don't have any proxies or bridges, so let's just do that. Connect to the relay, and meanwhile, we can shift back to our work cube right here and just do GIMP and run GIMP in our work module, in our work cube, right? File, new. Let's make a thumbnail, I guess. If I can remember the thumbnail size, it's 1280 by 720, and we can just start messing around in GIMP. And it's pretty fast, it's pretty responsive, considering what I've got going on here is LibreOffice, GIMP, and in another workspace entirely, I've just connected to the Tor relay through the Unix cube. Okay, so YouTube, Google's doing its whole, unusual traffic. So probably not the best idea to watch YouTube in the Tor browser in this kind of setup, but you can do it. Obviously, what you're not going to want to do, if I search on DuckDuckGo for, I don't know, this just comes to mind, the Arch user repository. If I search for that in DuckDuckGo, what you're not going to want to do when using the Tor browser on any system is make that full screen, because that's fingerprinting right there, because sites can detect the resolution of your monitor, and from that they can piece together a picture of the setup that you've built. So you're not going to want to maximize the Tor browser at all, really. But yeah, this works perfectly fine. So I can be browsing through Tor in my Unix cube, and I can swap back and just be working away in GIMP or in Office. And yeah, this is a really serviceable operating system. Obviously, it doesn't look particularly amazing, but it's not meant to. It's not meant to be beautiful. It's not meant to do, it's not meant to have all the bells and whistles that you get with something like, setting up Arch with KDE Plasma and all that sort of stuff. It's a very basic XFCE based distro that allows you to use Qubes that mimic other distros like Fedora, like Debian, like Unix, and do things separately, have separate workflows for separate tasks that never interfere with one another. And I like that. That's a really good principle to work with. So what we've got here, we've got updates cube. Now I can launch the updater and do it through a GUI, presumably. So let's shift into another workspace, open up the Fedora template terminal, and run the update that way. And I'm assuming all the commands are going to be the same. This is a Fedora metaphor, so it's going to be just the usual commands that you would use on Fedora to update the system, but we're just doing it from within the template itself. So if we just run the standard command, and see, that just runs as normal. Really cool. Really cool. And let's see how it multitasks. So in another workspace, so we've got the update for the template for Fedora running in there. Let's go into Unix and upgrade that. I mean, for someone who's not used Linux before, who's used the Windows especially, all these system updates are running in the background right now. We still have full use of our system, So let's just pull this up a bit. So unlike Windows, when you'll see the blue screen and the wheel turning, and you might be waiting 5 or 10 minutes and your system will be completely unusable whilst Microsoft updates everything, you don't have that issue on Linux. So let me just double check here about XFCE4 terminal emulator. I mean, why not? We're just messing around here. Update sudo apt upgrade, and yeah, so that just uses aptitude, so it's obviously related to Debian. It's going to update the repos, and then it's going to update the system. And let's switch back to the Fedora. That's still going. That's taken a while, but Cisco? Ugh. That's okay. They're only accessing my cube. And shit, let's switch to this XFCE terminal and update this. As I said earlier, you can of course do this through the GUI. It's always better and it's always quicker to do it through the terminal, and to be honest, the command line is nowhere near as big brain and intimidating as it looks, or people make it out to be. It really is just if you strip away all the graphical stuff, what you're left with is a series of words that you punch in to achieve the same result, but because you've stripped back all the graphical stuff, things happen in a blink of an eye. Obviously, they'd happen much quicker if this was on bare metal and if I had a decent internet connection, but beggars can't be choosers, and this all seems to be going perfectly well right now, considering we've got 3 terminals running 3 separate system updates, and we've got GIMP and Office open in the work queue. Yes, that's okay. See, that was that little confusion there, because DNF defaults to no, APT defaults to yes, and in here I assume we can just hit the enter key. Those updates are going to go through just fine, even if they take a little bit of time. I guess I'll get back to you when everything is finished updating. Okay then, so all our templates have been successfully updated. Just like in any Linux distribution, a regular update of the system is advisable to make sure that things keep running smoothly. We've been able to do that to 3 templates simultaneously, both the Unix ones and the Fedora one, which is really cool. I like that feature a lot. Okay, so we did try to create our own cube there, but because this VM is so limited, we don't have enough memory to do that with. So that sucks, but it seems like a pretty simple process. Just create cubes and you can tailor it how you want and things of that nature. So yeah, I think we've seen about all we really need to see here for just a general overview of this OS. So I'm going to sort of tinker around a bit, and I'll let you know my final thoughts in just a second here. So, what do I think after spending a little bit of time with QubesOS? Well, let's start with what I don't like, because I don't think this would apply to an actual use case of this distro. What I don't like is the experience of using it as a virtual machine. And what I mean by that is, obviously I used VMware Workstation to install QubesOS to a virtual drive and then basically ran a virtualized operating system that by definition utilizes numerous virtual machines. So we've got this sort of infinite regress of virtual machines, and I couldn't really dedicate the hardware to this virtual machine to really fully appreciate how good QubesOS can be, because obviously as a base it's running XFCE, which is really lightweight. The HTOP read down here isn't too bad, although the memory is staggering, but I think that DOM0 allocates bits of the memory to each cube, and that would mean that all the hardware that I've allocated to DOM0 is then being shared out by each cube. So, beggars can't be choosers, as I said earlier, and essentially the performance, it was a little bit lacking, but that's because I'm using it in a way that it's not really designed to be used. This is meant to be your base operating system. It is meant to be your daily driver, and using it as a VM, you're just not going to see what it's really capable of. On the other hand, what I do like about it is that just the very principle of your operating system being designed around the idea of a virtual machine is really, really cool. Your root, i.e. DOM0, is never going to be affected by whatever you do in these cubes as long as you're responsible. Obviously, DOM0 can be compromised if you do something stupid, but thinking about the way it works and how it's set up, you would have to be either really dumb or essentially you would have to try really hard to break DOM0. So I've got to hand it to them. The principle here is security, and security here is fantastic. Hands down, no complaints there. The GUI, it's a little bit dated, but again, you wouldn't be using this for its looks. You'd be using this to be able to do what you need to do online without worrying about being entrenched in the ecosystem of tech giants like Google and Microsoft and whatnot. So that's nice. I also like the fact that you've got some options available to you when you're making cubes, You've got Debian available, you've got Fedora available. So it's all there for you to utilize, which means, you can utilize the APT in specific circumstances, or you can utilize DNF in other circumstances. And it's just nice. It's just really cool to have those options available. It's a little bit difficult to use, I will admit, but it's not going to be convenient. Well, that's the wrong way to put it. I guess the way to think about it is QubesOS is going to be a tool to enable you to change your habits about the way that you interact with the online world, and that presents you with certain limits. For example, changing my wallpaper here to a picture of Edward Snowden, I had to use the personal cube to find a picture, download that to that cube, then open that up in full screen and screenshot it with Dom0's built-in screenshot application, which then saved the screenshot to Dom0's directories, and I could allocate it as my background through there. So doing simple things that you sort of take for granted on standard operating systems, you're going to have to find little workarounds in order to get those little bits of personalization and personal touches to your OS. But on the whole, what's at stake is your privacy and your security, and QubesOS is providing you with the opportunity to have a system that will maximize your ability to stay private and stay secure online, as long as you're willing to put in the effort to understand you're not going to be able to use the internet in the same way. Like, this wouldn't be an ideal setup for, gaming on at all. I'd imagine this would be terrible for that purpose. It's not going to be advisable to start dipping into social media on something like this. I mean, you could do it. Again, it's all about adjusting the way you interact with the online world, and QubesOS gives you the tools that you need to do that without worrying about, well, actually, whilst on the surface it feels kind of secure, i.e. Windows, really they're just funneling telemetry and data straight back to Microsoft and fingerprinting all your devices. So on the whole, QubesOS, really interesting idea, and I'm excited to see where this goes. Would I run this as a daily driver? No, I think I prefer to harden my browsers and be a bit more cautious and actually just use virtual machines for different things and have a normal host operating system. But for people that don't want to install a bunch of virtual machines onto a host operating system and want something a little bit more secure, this is the way to go. So I've been DK Priori, and this was QubesOS.